Let's just take us through last week's performance. We saw for the week the market falling back by 1.75%. It seems very few stocks were spared from the sell-off we saw, but there were some pockets of positive trade. We saw cement makers all on the uptick there. We also saw East African breweries continue to gain traction after the release of its results. Take us through your insight into what we saw playing out last week.
Well, last week was more or less the same as what analysts had anticipated. That is a downward trend. The downward trend is actually expected to continue. We've had the indices also shed a lot of points. Right now, the all-share index is about 0.5% lower than what it was last week, Thursday. And looking at it, those are the same levels it was at in January 2010. Looking at the 20-share index, at 3,300 and something points, it's almost as low as it was last year, January. So as we move towards the end of the year, we expect further decline, and more so because of the economic landscape.
Let's
Looking at the stocks, yeah.
Continue.
Yeah, about the other stocks like Bamburi, you mentioned East African breweries, these are blue chip stocks, so we expect activity to remain fairly stable in coming weeks.
Let's drill into some company-specific news. For example, Kenya Airways, that stock has been under considerable pressure for many sessions now, fell 4% on the week to 30 shillings. And of course, it looks like it has more competition with the upcoming listing of Precision Air. Of course, this is a much smaller player in the region, and it is still set to indicate its IPO schedule tomorrow. But what type of competition would this pose for the likes of Kenya Airways, which stock has been under some pressure?
Kenya Airways is not going anywhere, and Precision Air I think it's a Tanzanian airline. I don't think will be much of a competitor in terms of a listed stock under the airline industry. And if I'm not wrong, 49% of Precision Air is actually owned by Kenya Airways. And also looking at the number of routes Precision Air manages, about 4 routes: Comoros, South Africa, Tanzania, and Kenya. You can hardly compare that with the 70+ routes Kenya Airways handles.
Of course, as you say, a much smaller player, but is there an investment case for a company like Precision Air?
Yes, it may be, there is, but it may be really tricky for them, especially finding themselves in an industry which smaller players are actually making their way around. We have like Jetlink, we have OneJet1, we have other smaller players in the airline industry who may be more of a competitor than the bigger player.
And of course, we saw the undersubscription of British American Insurance undersubscribed by 40%. So what's the likelihood that we'll have 100% subscription for a small company like Precision?
Chances are it will get that. Right now, the market is it's really subdued. It's really repressed, and people think that it may not be the best time to get in. That in itself is an ingredient for undersubscription. Looking at British American, their target was 30% subscription. I think they have already got 100% more than that. They got 60%. So they are good to go. We're now waiting to see how those funds will be used in the investment profile.
Let's focus in on Kenya Airways, because as I said, that stock has been under considerable pressure now at 30 shillings, a PE of 3.9. Some saying it's looking severely oversold rather. But of course, we do know there's a liquidity call coming up. The company said it's looking to raise $247 million from the market. That won't be enough, though, in order to pay for the new 10 new Embraer fleet that it bought. That's costing around $430 million. What are your thoughts on the company at this stage? Is it time to be buying the stock in light of the aggressive plans it has, or are you concerned about the funding program and funding mechanisms for Kenya Airways?
In fact, Kenya Airways is one of my top 10 stocks in terms of what to invest in right now in the medium to long term, because looking at it, the PE is very discounted, very low PE. Looking at price progression, it's really been on a downward trend ever since 2 years ago when they had their crash. And right now, we have the fuel, they hedged on fuel, so they are paying below the market rate for fuel. They are cutting costs on that. They have moved into new routes, and now they're seeking to have a rights issue, which I think is a good move. And I would still put Kenya Airways on the black, and I would say it's actually a stock to look to buy right now.
Buy Kenya Airways. Let's move on to the insurance sector. We've got British American Insurance expected to list this week after delaying last week. CFC Insurance reporting a solid set of results last week. That stock, one of the resilient stocks on the bourse, trading higher for the week. Let's just discuss the insurance sector as a whole, though, because many are saying that it's well due a period of consolidation, given the fact that we have almost 50 insurance firms all competing for a very small pool of funds, given the fact that only 7% of Kenyans are believed to be covered by some form of insurance. What are your thoughts on playing in the insurance sector and looking at specific stocks like CFC versus a Jubilee, which is, of course, a lot bigger?
Well, the insurance industry, in spite of the fact that there are many players now in the recent times, remains highly unpenetrated. We have very few people, especially the ordinary Kenyan, if you may, who have access to insurance, medical or otherwise. So the retail insurance remains highly unpenetrated. And I think this is what players like British American, people like Jubilee and the others plan to capture, the micro-insurance segment. And looking at the players themselves, like Jubilee, they have been around, they have been in the stock market since 1984. They are not going anywhere. Those may be some of the companies people may think of investing in right now. And maybe British American as a new introduction may be a cheap alternative to Jubilee. What
are your thoughts on a Jubilee versus a CFC Insurance? As I said, a strong set of first half results from CFC, 75% increase in pre-tax profits there. That stock, though, trading on a trailing PE of 16.6 versus a Jubilee of just under 5 or 4. So, you know, Jubilee looking cheap at this stage, but of course the stock representative of the value it holds on the stock exchange at 160 or so shillings.
Well, 16 as an earnings multiple for CFC, to me, looks a bit expensive. I would rather still move back to Jubilee for fundamental and technical reasons. Looking at the company, as I said, from 1984 has been in the stock exchange. CFC Insurance, on the other hand, has been in the market for less than 1 year. So being as risk averse as I always am, I would rather put my money in a company that's been there for 27 years. Other than that, also looking at the results out you just mentioned, they put a lot of promise for Jubilee. CFC Insurance, not bad either, but I guess when it comes to the Kenyan stock market, public perception rules, and I think here most people would be inclined to Jubilee.
So Robert, as a risk-averse investor, can you give us your stock pick for the day then?
I would go for my usual. I like the banking stocks, Barclays being #1, trading at a discount in my view. 12 shillings, 95 cents is a clinch. I would also go for the energy sector stocks. Kenyan, results yet to be released, usually high dividend yield paying stock. They have also invested in geothermal, and I'm looking to see what they have in store.